In this video, I'm going to explain my process for taking notes on scholarly articles so that you can have a simpler process and so that in the end, when it's time to write your paper, it'll go a little bit more easily. So what you're looking at right now is a series of notes that I've taken from articles that I've read. And actually, it's really just 2 articles that you're seeing right here, but you're seeing a total of 4 different note cards. And just a little message on my note cards. I am not suggesting that you go out and buy anything to do this task. In fact, it should be a free activity. I pull paper out of the recycling bin at school. I'm like that garbage diver who finds recycled paper, and I tear it into quarters, and then that serves as my note cards, because these are just temporary. These are just things to write on so that when you're writing your paper, you'll be able to use this information really easily. So I'm trying to figure out which step I should tell you first. Okay, obviously I found an article, right? And I already transferred the reference information from the library or from Google or wherever I found the article. I took the actual reference information and started to attach it to my reference list. So that's already been noted. So I know who, for example, I don't know if you guys can read these or not, but these first 3 are from Kunstmann and Gaither. So these, I just put the names of the author at the very top and the year of publication so that I would be able to keep track of where these notes came from. And then on each card, I wrote down separate ideas, independent ideas that I got from the sources. I happen to be working right now on a paper on homeschooling, and so my references have to do with homeschooling literature. So this Kunstmann and Gaither one, this first one says the majority of studies reviewed focused on social skills acquisition. So Kunstmann and Gaither was a big literature review, and most of the things that they reviewed had to do with social skills acquisition. And then I made a little note to myself because, we're writing a paper based on research we did. And so to myself, I mentioned we're focused on values formation. And so when I look at Kunstmann and Gaither with specific values formation as part of social skills, they really looked at autonomy and democratic citizenship. So that's what relates to our ideas. They had found research on autonomy and democratic citizenship, and that I wanted to note for myself when it's time to write the paper that that's what they had focused on. Here we have from that same article, a common criticism of homeschooling is students won't be enmeshed in societal norms. Another comment that they made is that it deprives kids of exposure to peers. Now, it's really important to notice that while I'm taking these notes, I'm taking what they actually said and putting it into my own sort of shorthand voice. It's really a great step as you read an article to internalize what the authors actually said and rephrase it in your own words immediately. Like immediately think, what does this mean? How does it relate to the topic that I'm studying? Right? So for my research, my co-researcher and I, we were really interested in whether formerly homeschooled kids were more or less active extracurricularly when they got into their young adulthood. Did they belong to more clubs? Did they vote more often? Different kinds of things. Like, was there a difference? So we were looking for literature that would touch on those kinds of issues: socialization, belonging to a group, being active, those kinds of things. So we're looking for literature that would support those ideas. So we have actual research that we're doing, but when you're doing a literature review, you have an idea, you have a topic that you're studying. And so you're going to look for articles that relate to that topic, and then you're going to have to try and figure out how those articles relate to your topic. Right? So as you're reading through their introduction section, as you read through their conclusion section, you're really going to get information that'll help you to flesh out your own idea. Right? So for example, we were really interested in belonging to clubs. And so when Kunstmann and Gaither talked about, social skills acquisition, we're like, well, part of belonging to groups, part of belonging to clubs is that you learn the social mores of those groups. You learn how to sort of get along with other people. That's really social skills acquisition. So reading their literature review helped us to formulate, okay, what do we really mean by belonging to groups? What do we really mean by belonging to clubs? Those kinds of things. So as you're reading, take little notes, because these articles will give you ideas to help you flesh out even your own idea. So I like to put different kinds of ideas from a single author onto different cards, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. So that'll help to explain why there are 3 cards for Kunstman and Gaither. This last card, I have there 2 categories of socialization that Kunstman and Gaither really emphasized. Learning social norms, so one can function in society, is their first category. And then their second category is the formation of one's own values as a function of interacting with members of society. So Kunstman and Gaither defined these as 2 different categories. And I wrote that down because I thought this might be relevant to us as we're going through our own arguments about what students who attend traditional school gather from that experience versus kids who are homeschooled and what they gather from that experience. Do we see maybe possibly students in one scenario picking up one of these categories more than the other, or are they both equally represented, or maybe one of them is missing both, those kinds of things. So I thought it was really important to note this issue that they illustrated. So those are the kinds of things that you might write down from a single author. And these were kind of disparate things. They all had to do with socialization, but they were taking it from different angles. This other article by Batterby, this is just, all I wrote down was what they found in their study. And that was that homeschooled children scored higher on autonomy and intrinsic motivation. Now notice something. They scored higher on autonomy. Now we put down the Kunstman and Gaither, that first note card that I showed you, and it says values formation, autonomy. That's an overlap, right? So I'm looking for themes between authors. I'm looking for individual ideas from each author, and I'm making notes about those things. Now, when it's time for me to write this paper, I might put these 2 ideas next to each other. This idea that Batterby found that homeschooled children displayed more autonomy, and Kunstman and Gaither talked about autonomy being one of those values that's being formed through socialization. So these are things I might tie together later when it's time for me to write my literature review. Now I wanted to show you something else. So I'm going to switch screens real quickly here. And I'm going to go to my OneDrive, where I do a little warehousing of articles. When you find articles either on Google Scholar or EBSCOhost or ProQuest or whatever, you can send the PDF to yourself in your email and then save it somewhere. So I put it on OneDrive so that whether I'm at work or I'm at home or whatever, I have access to the literature that I'm working on at the moment. And so these are a series of articles, and you'll notice that the 2 that I just talked about are actually, Kunstman and Gaither is here, but the Batterby one I never actually put in here. And what I've done is you'll see little X's next to the names of the ones that I've actually already read and taken my notes on. Unfortunately, I left my pile of notes at school, and we are currently, as I record this, in lockdown, so I'm not allowed to go back to my office. So my full stack of hard copy notes that I've made on all these articles is actually back at school. So this is how I store articles. I don't print anything. I put them all in one file. You can put it on your hard drive. You can save it wherever you want. You have files area in Canvas. You can do it. There are a lot of places you could store these files. I really strongly recommend against printing these articles. It'll waste a lot of paper, and it actually is really hard for you to keep track of which ideas you got from which author, and you'll have to flip through the articles searching for that thing you highlighted, and it's just really, really cumbersome. So I don't recommend printing. I recommend you keeping your articles so you don't have to search for them later. At the minimum, you'll have your references, so you could always find an article later because you saved the reference and it's on your reference list. But I like to save my PDFs. It doesn't hurt, and it just is a nice way to keep things organized. Now, what I thought I'd share with you also that I keep in my OneDrive is sort of this working model of what I'm working on. So you'll notice one of my cards was the Batterby card, and then here it is again showing up on this little sort of annotated bibliography that I started making as I started working on this paper. So I've got Batterby. I went ahead and put the URL that'll take it back to the library where I can find it. And it's actually not something that's available easily. So I had to find it on this kind of strange library system. And I gave my little notes, and that's what I mean by an annotated kind of bibliography, where here, the Ray one, I've got the full reference that I just copied and pasted from Google, and I haven't even like corrected any errors or anything. I've just put it here. And then I've got just sort of like these highlight ideas that came from them. So this one, I gave a note to myself. I'm going to have to go to the King County Library System to retrieve this one. It's not available through the Eastern Washington Library. I haven't got a library card yet. I moved to Spokane in 2018 and haven't gotten my card for the Spokane County Library System yet. So I'm still using my King County Library System. But anyway, it turns out it's available for public viewing at the public library, but it's not in the Eastern Washington Library. So I have to go find that one still. And so I just made little notes to keep things organized. You'll notice this Ray, I've got a PDF link for myself, and I just kind of characterize it as, it's just a bunch of facts about homeschooling. It's got statistics and demographics and all sorts of things in it. So I just kind of gave that note to myself. So, I'm working through a series of different articles and trying to sort of distill them. One of the biggest advantages to characterizing what the article said in your own words right now is that later, when you go to write your paper, you're not going to have to sit there and struggle over how to not plagiarize the original writing. You've already taken the original author's idea when you first read it and you internalized it and thought, oh, this makes me think of, or this is what I think is important about it. Right then, rephrase what the original author said. In fact, I find that these little short sentences, higher rates of voting and civic engagement, it's even easier for me to, now that I know that Ray reported higher rates of voting and civic engagement among formerly homeschooled students, now I know that I could use that information and I can elaborate on it however I want to phrase it. I don't have to worry that I'm going to accidentally plagiarize Ray, because I've already taken it out of his words and put it into my version of it. So one of the really great, efficient things that you can do is take those kinds of notes the first time you encounter the article. I've been a student, believe it or not, for a lot of years. And when I was a beginning student, we didn't have the ability really to print articles. You'd have to photocopy them, and every photocopy page cost 10 cents. And it was like, oh, no way am I spending, $1 for this stupid article? No way. So we had to take notes. So by the time, further on in my training, we had the ability to start printing articles, I'd already gotten into the habit of taking notes. So when I started encountering students who were printing articles, I was like, oh, maybe I should print my articles and then I could highlight. And I realized, oh my gosh, I am wasting so much time looking for things now that I've done that. So putting things on little individual note cards. So like this little list that I've got on this piece of single paper here in my OneDrive, I will actually transfer these little notes onto note cards so that then they'll be mobile. So let me show you what I mean by mobile. Back to my webcam. So like I said, now I've got this Batterby finding on autonomy, and I've got this Kunstman and Gaither assertion about autonomy, and I'm going to be able to pile these together. Okay, these two are related ideas, right? And then maybe if I had all my cards, maybe I'd have another author who said something similar to this 2 categories of socialization issue, and I could pile it on top of this. Maybe I'd have 2 or 3 things I would pile together, right? And so as I pile similar topics together, then I start to see a pattern of how the different articles all relate to each other. And a lot of times it sort of helps me to just write the paper based on these piles. I kind of look at, okay, which ones do I want to introduce first within this topic of autonomy? Do I want to deal with the fact that there maybe are 2 categories of socialization first, and under one of the categories, then I could insert autonomy as an issue, right? So I can start to think about, how do I want to make this paper flow based on moving these pieces of paper, these little cards around into different piles and different orientations. So I cannot recommend strongly enough the idea of actually using these cards to organize your thoughts. so that you don't feel the day before the paper's due like, oh gosh, I don't even know how all this stuff relates. I don't even know. I don't know where to start. If you have the ideas written down on cards, you can kind of look through them periodically, sort of maybe organize them by loose topics to start with, and maybe a third article that you read suddenly brings it all together and you're like, oh my gosh, now I see how these two relate, because now I've got this third one. So now I have all three of these that really all relate to each other and I can explain them in one group. So it gives you insights is basically my argument. Using this strategy will give you insights for how to write your paper. So I really strongly recommend that you try and use these note cards as a way to really streamline your writing process. So good luck. I hope you'll try it, and I hope it works for you.